Hey everybody, in this video I'll show you 5 easy techniques that you can use to sound like your favorite grunge bands from the 90s. Alright, so before we start, just a quick word on the equipment we're going to be using today. I'm going to be using my Fender Twin Reverb 65 reissue tube amp, and I'm mostly going to be using this Rat distortion pedal. It gives you a wide variety of tones, everything from distortion to like crunch to like a full-on thick fuzz. And then 2 other pedals you might want to think about to get some vintage grunge sounds are the small clone full chorus pedal. And then I have the nano version of the Big Muff fuzz pedal. I'll have Amazon links in the description where you can buy these pedals if you want. Alright, so a lot of the grunge bands from the 90s were known for their kind of dark, heavy, ominous tone. And an easy way to achieve this effect is to tune your guitar down to drop D tuning. So if you're kind of new to this tuning, what we're going to do is we are going to start with our guitar tuned to standard tuning. And then we are just going to drop the low E string down to D. And so starting from the thickest string, we have the guitar tuned as D, A, D, G, B, E. And drop D tuning is great for a lot of things. The first is really heavy riffs that you can play with one finger. So for example, in that Soundgarden riff, we are basically playing a power chord, an F, just by playing our finger across the bottom 2 strings at the 3rd fret. And so this gives us the freedom to kind of use another finger to do like a power chord type riff that might be difficult to play if you're playing the standard power chord form with both your fingers. And create some cool tones. And then it also gives us the power chords rooted on the A string. Beyond just power chords, drop D tuning really gives us the ability to play these dark, heavy, ominous chords that we wouldn't normally be able to play in standard tuning. So a good example of this is the song Stars by Hum. They use drop D tuning a lot too. So normally we wouldn't be able to play that root on the low E where we're playing with our index finger. And so it gives us access to that position and allows us to play these really heavy chords that we normally wouldn't be able to play. And we can also do a really thick version of a power chord that we normally wouldn't be able to play by doing this. So we're basically just bridging our index finger across the 6th fret here, playing that 3-note power chord. And then we're going to add our ring finger at the 8th fret of the G string and our pinky at the 9th fret of the B string. And that creates this really thick power chord by just duplicating the power chord notes, the 1st and the 5th. Another thing that drop D allows us to do that's really cool is we can play the bottom 3 strings open. And that's a power chord. And now we can use that to add some drone notes on the other strings. So again, Hum does it in their song Stars. So we've got that chord, and then we're just playing at the 9th fret of the A string and getting that kind of drone sound. And you can move it up and down the neck. And it has a very unique sound. So we can do that here. And then we can also do an accent on like the G string or other strings, which gives you that really cool drone tone. All right, so the next technique is single note, almost atonal riffs. And we're gonna stick in drop D tuning for this. And the first example I have is Slaves and Bulldozers by Soundgarden. And so we're staying in the drop D tuning and we're using that D as a root, which a lot of bands will do. They'll kind of go back and forth between a riff and that root on the D string. And since a lot of the 90s grunge bands were influenced heavily by Black Sabbath, they kind of have this slow, almost sludgy, Black Sabbath-y riff type feel where they're using a minor scale and doing an almost atonal type of riff. So for this example, we're starting off on the bottom string, which is a D. And we're just gonna hit that twice. And then we're gonna do this half-step descending riff from the 9th to the 8th fret with a little bit of vibrato. And this is like super Black Sabbath-y. And then we're just going to slide down and do this back and forth. So. and then ending on the 3rd fret of the D string. And it gives it that kind of ominous feel, especially with the drop D tuning and those half-step intervals. Another example is Mudhoney in the song In and Out of Grace. They do this 3-note descending pattern that is in D sharp, and it kind of has this like atonal almost quality. So again, we're doing these like half-step intervals, which give it that kind of uncomfortable, like almost unresolved feel. So we can take this and apply this to our own music by finding the key of the song and then adding these half-step intervals into like a minor pentatonic type scale, or just using the straight up minor scale, and create these kind of awkward, ominous single note phrasings. The next technique is dynamics. And dynamics is basically changing the loudness or perceived loudness of the song in order to create a big impact at certain points in the song. So for example, we can take Smells Like Teen Spirit. So you can see at the beginning of the song is quiet and a clean tone. And then when the full band comes on, the distortion kicks in, it gets really loud. And then after that first chorus without the singing, it's kind of brought back and quieted again. So two things are happening. We're going from a clean tone to a distorted tone. And the clean tone is kind of quieter and the distorted tone is louder. So we've got the change in dynamics going from quiet to loud, which creates an impact. And then we've got the change in the perceived dynamics with the quieter or cleaner guitar tone going to a distorted tone. And so Nirvana does this in a ton of songs. A lot of grunge bands do it as well. And what this is going to do is it's really going to create a big impact when you come to the crescendo of the song. And you don't necessarily have to just go from clean to distorted tone. You could go from a wide open strumming to like palm muting. So again, the key is to create a big enough difference in the loudness or perceived loudness to create an impact for the part that you want to have the biggest impact. And so the next technique we can use is the inverted power chord. So we're still in standard tuning here. And the inverted power chord is basically a power chord that you would normally play rooted on the A string. So for example, if we wanted to take a D, we would have our index finger rooted at the 5th fret of the A string and our ring finger bridged across the D and G strings at the 7th fret. And so that's a D. And then if we wanted to play the inverted root version, we're basically just bridging our index finger across the 5th fret of the low E also. So we have our index finger bridged across the 5th fret of the E and A, and our ring finger bridged across the 7th fret of the D and G. And it sounds like this. So normal D, inverted D. So it sounds thicker, heavier, and darker. And a great example of this is the Nirvana song, Francis Farmer Will Have Revenge on Seattle. So it basically goes like this. And so it's just an inverted power chord progression. And just to hear the difference of what it sounds like if we just played the normal power chords on that. And then we go to the inverted. It really just thickens it up and makes it a much darker chord progression. And you can even go back and forth with chords that are rooted on the E string and play the inverted root for the chords that are rooted on the A string and then go to the normal power chord version for the E string. So. And so then the last technique we're going to talk about is just a power chord riff. And this isn't too much different from what you might hear from like standard rock and roll or other types of music. The grunge bands took this from punk rock mostly, but what kind of makes it grungy is the type of intervals within the chord progressions. So we're gonna do like throw in some half-step intervals to kind of give it that kind of ominous or off sound. So a good example is Mudhoney's Touch Me, I'm Sick. So we've kind of got a normal chord progression if we take out that half-step interval. But we add that half-step interval from the D to the C sharp, and it gives it that kind of grungy tone. So. So there's tons of examples like these. Nirvana uses a lot of half-step intervals in their power chord progressions. Again, Mudhoney, and even some of the later grunge bands that were kind of derivative of the original grunge scene use this technique a lot. So that's it for this one. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe for more content like this. I post new videos weekly, and I'll see you guys next time.